The first task that we want to look at is sounding like this. You need to write a code to get an array of names from given array of users. And as you can see here, we have an array of users, and actually it is just an array of objects with ID, name, and is active property. And actually this is a relatively easy task, but it is really nice to start the interview. And experienced interviewers will know that you are on stress, which actually means you must receive several easy exercises just so you are relaxing a little bit and you can be more focused and more productive. And actually, even an easy exercise can tell interviewer quite a lot. What code style you are using, how do you name your variables, and how you are writing your code, so he can understand on what level you are and what questions he needs to ask you. So now I highly recommend you to pause this video and try to implement it by yourself. If you just want to follow along, then let's code this. And actually there are several ways to implement it. Normally beginners will start with for loop because it is the easiest approach what they know. For example, here after our users array, we can write here a for loop. So we have here for let index from 0 to user's length. So here we have I smaller than user's length, and here we have I++. Now inside our for loop we want to access every single name and push it in some new array. This is why before we want to create a new array, let's name it names and it will be an empty array. Now inside our for loop we can write names.push, and here inside we are accessing our users with I, so this is our current user, .name. In this case, we are pushing only a name of this user in this array. And after our for loop, we can just console log our new names and check it in browser. I am reloading the page, and as you can see, our result is Jack, John, Mike. This is exactly what we need to implement. And yes, we solved our task, and if you are a beginner, this solution is totally fine, but you can do better, because every single time when you write a better code on interview, you show that you are a better developer. This is why let's comment out this code and try again. So what we can use here instead of for loop is for each function for our array. This is why here we can simply write users.forEach, and inside we must provide a callback function. What is more importantly, we are getting access here to every single user. And now inside we can do whatever we want. And as you can see here, we don't have any indexes and our code is looking much better. So what we want to do here is exactly the same stuff like we did previously. We created here an array names, and now inside our for each loop we want to push inside our names our user.name. And as you can see, in comparison to our old code, this code is much easier to read. Let's uncomment here our console log and check if it's working. As you can see, we are getting exactly the same results, so this is your level 2 of writing code. But actually the best way to solve this task is to use additional map function, and actually it will make your code the simplest just because you are using the right tool for the right task. In this case here we can write that we want to get back our names array, and here we want to loop through our users with the map function. And if you don't know what map is doing, we are looping through every single element inside our array and we return some new data for every single element. In our case, instead of our object, we want to return a single name. This is why here we can write that we have user and we want to return here user.name. Let's check if it's working. As you can see in browser, we are getting exactly the same output. But this is the best variant for this task and it shows that you know what you are doing. For solution is almost always low level, which means you exactly need to implement what you are doing. In this case here we need to say that we are pushing elements to our new array names. And also what you can see here, we created names array before using for loop, which actually means our logic and our additional variable don't have anything together. In our case here we are writing result directly to our new variable names. So you successfully solved this task and now you are getting the next one. We need to get back only active users, which means our first point here is valid, but this must be only active users. And actually we could use any method that we want here to solve this. For example, we could use here for loop and simply write inside an if condition, and we can check here if our user is active. And if this property is true, then inside we want to push our element to our new array. And as you can see in browser, we are getting here only 2 users because our last user is inactive. This is totally fine, but we have here 2 problems. First of all, our code is low level, and secondly, we are mixing here logic together with filtering elements and mapping them. And this is bad because when your code is more complex, then it is more difficult to split it. And actually the solution with for each will be exactly the same. But let's look on the solution with map. Actually what we want to do here, we want first of all to filter our array and get only active users, and only after that we want to apply our map. So we can write here .filter, and we have exactly the same logic. We have here access to our user, and we must return here a predicate with true or false. In our case it will be user.isActive. So if our user is active, then we will leave it inside our array, in other case we will throw it away. And after this we are calling our map to map names. What is important in this code here, we are not mixing mapping and filtering together, which means it is easier to support such code. Now we have another task. You are getting sort users by age descending, and of course true first rules also applies. Which means we first of all must sort our array, and then we need to filter our array and map our names. And as you can see here now, additionally we are getting age property. This is our property by which we will sort our array. And actually in JavaScript, if you want to sort something, you must use only a single JavaScript function, and it is .sort. You can't really do it differently. If you don't know how array sort function is working, you can jump to developers.mozilla.org to this URL, and here is array prototype sort. The main idea is that we are calling sort function on our array, and inside we pass a function comparator with a and b. And in our case it will be first user and second user, and then second user and third user, which means it is comparing elements one by one, and here we must return something. As you can see inside we can return -1 if a is less than b, then we will reorder it. Now we must return 1 if a is greater than b, and we are returning 0 if they are equal. And this is exactly what we must do here. So in all the 3 cases we must write the same code. But in the first 2 variants it will be kind of ugly, because actually we must do the sorting before our code here. So let's uncomment our code here, and we want to apply sorting. And here we want to write users.sort, and we are getting here our comparator. So we have here user1 and user2, and we want to compare them by age. This is why we can write here user1.age is less than user2.age. And if it is true, then here we want a ternary operator, we want to return -1, in other case we want to return 1. Let's save this and check if it's working. I'm jumping to browser, reload the page, and we're getting John and Jack. Let's check this out on the top. John is 18 and Jack is 20, which means we sorted our data correctly, but in ascending order. As you can see here, we must sort it in descending order, which means we want to swap here not -1 but 1, and here will be -1. Let's check this out. We are getting first of all Jack and then John, and this is correct sorting. Also, you must remember that sort operation in JavaScript mutates an array. This is why here we directly called sort and we didn't assign our result to some property, because it just mutates our user's array and then we are doing other stuff with it. But as you can see here, this code is really separated from our for loop because we must do it before our operations inside. Now let's comment this code and try to use it with our map and filter. And here it is much easier to do because we simply want here after our users to call .sort and after this to call filter and map. As you can see here, when I uncomment it, it is looking really pretty. We have here our users, we are doing our sorting, after this we do our filtering and then mapping. And first of all, this code is much easier to read. You have here chaining and you are getting your result in this one single property. Also, it is important that we are not mixing different operations. First we are doing sort, then filtering, then map, and if we need to adjust one of them, we don't need to change the logic of another one. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page and we're getting exactly the same result. So as you can see, you can solve even a simple task in different ways. If you want to show on interview that you are an advanced developer, you must use a specific tool for your specific task. This is why the chain of sort, mapping and filter here is much better than using for loop.